Welcome to our Media Shower Better Communication series. This is Improving the Assembly Line. We've talked in previous videos about how successful content campaigns have consistency and persistency, or quality and quantity. And to achieve that, we have the assembly line. The assembly line is what produces this high-quality content that helps us communicate effectively in today's media landscape. Each person on this assembly line plays an important role. And what comes out of the other end of that is action-packed content, or content that gets people to take action. Now, sometimes on this assembly line, we have bottlenecks. And those bottlenecks are when the assembly line shuts down at a specific point. And this is a problem. It's a problem usually in two places. First is in publishing, and the second is in what we'll call approval. And these two sections make up about 90% of the problems that we have in our content assembly lines across all of our clients over time. Now, when we have these bottlenecks, when the assembly line stops, the problem is that everything before that doesn't stop. And so ultimately, we have these pieces of content that start piling up and waiting for people to deal with them. So just because it stops down here doesn't mean it can easily stop up at the other part. The problem with that is then we become part of the problem. In other words, because people know that they're holding up this entire assembly line and the problems get bigger and bigger every day, instead of the content, the communication being a pleasure, it becomes a problem. And that's a problem. So in this video, we'll talk about how to solve these content bottlenecks, which are really caused by a handful of simple problems. And we'll give you the solutions. Now, the human reason, the emotional reason that bottlenecks happen is almost always because of fear. It's almost always because people are afraid that when they publish something, they're going to get it wrong. It's going to look bad. There's going to be legal problems. It's not going to be on brand. In some way, it's not going to work. Well, what they should be concerned about are things like, what if we don't publish anything? Well, then we don't learn anything, and we aren't able to do our jobs, which is to communicate and ultimately get our message out there so that we grow the business. So we've got to shift our thinking from being concerned about getting it perfect to being concerned about getting it done. Content can be changed. If we look at a great institution like the New York Times, they have both quantity, they produce an enormous amount of content, and quality. They've won over 100 Pulitzers over the years. And every day, they actually have a section on their site where they just list corrections, all the mistakes they've made every day. Now, we don't even have to do this. If we're publishing a blog and we misspell someone's name, we are not held to the same journalistic standards that the New York Times is. We can, of course, put a correction in there. But the easier thing is just to fix the person's name. If legal comes back to us and says we have a problem with something you said or the way we worded this, we just fix it and we move on. The problem is not going to be, in most cases, saying the wrong thing. The problem is going to be getting anyone to listen in the first place. By far, that is the bigger problem that we have to face. So content can be changed. Now, publishing is where most of the first problems that we see lie. And typically this is on a blog. That's where we're publishing most of our new content. Now, the blog publisher is a role. It's a person. And it needs to be a dedicated person that's responsible for taking the finished content and posting it on the blog and doing what we'll call the wrapper. See our video on the wrapper. Blog publishers then need to be both identified, we need to have a person who does it, that's their job, and empowered, meaning they have to be able to do it and have the authority to do it. Now at Media Shower, we have a publishing team, so we do this for our clients. But sometimes clients want to keep this in-house. That's a problem if it can't be done in-house. So the typical problems we have are, first of all, we want to do it in-house, but we don't really have anyone to do it. Well, we need to find someone to do it. Of course, we can provide that person, or you can provide that person, but somebody has to be identified and empowered. Many times it is because the technical team can't or won't give publishing access. And the solution here is simple: give access. There's always a way to give someone else access to publish to a blog. That's how blogs work. So figure it out. And then sometimes we'll see that clients simply don't have a blog. And the solution there is get a blog. So that's publishing bottlenecks. The other part of the process is approval bottlenecks. So this is typically where we have produced the piece, but there is some kind of holdup in actually getting it into the publishing or production process. And for this, we need a single content owner. So often we'll hear clients say, why don't you just show all of us and we'll all give you our feedback? Well, the result of that is usually that no one gives the feedback because there's not a single content owner. So we need one person who really has responsibility for this. And again, like the production role, they need to be both empowered and then also held accountable for the results. In other words, for getting the content approved and through the system. So when we have multiple content owners, when the boss says, I need to review everything before it goes live, well, then the boss needs to be the content owner, and the boss needs to be held accountable. If it's someone under the boss, then that should be the single content owner. Now, we've set up our Media Shower system in this way that there is only one content owner associated with an account. There's one email address. Sometimes clients say, we all want to see it, send it to everyone. Well, that one person can share it with everyone, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the one person should ultimately be accountable. Sometimes we identify the wrong content owner. It's either somebody that can't do the job, or maybe they're too busy, or maybe they just aren't good at the job. And that's why we need to both empower them, but also hold them accountable. So we need to be seeing how much content actually gets through and the quality of that content, the quality and the quantity. And sometimes, often, we see perfectionism as the culprit, where people feel that nothing's ever good enough and therefore nothing ever gets done. So we have to measure both the quality and the quantity of the content. It does us no good to get one piece out each month because you're not going to communicate very well with a cadence of one blog post per month. Now, sometimes we legitimately have multiple approvers. Let's say, for example, that we have a legal team that needs to review all of the content before it can go live on the site. And the way we handle that, again, is by having a single content owner who runs the show. So that's the person who is responsible for herding the cats, or basically coordinating everyone internally. Everyone else has a say, meaning they give feedback. But we will put all of those into a single Google Doc using the suggesting feature. So first of all, we use Google Docs. We do not use Word documents, which will quickly proliferate and will quickly lose track of who's got which version. We use Google Docs because they can be tracked in one document. There's a single source of truth. And we want to use the suggesting feature because we want to see everyone's feedback at once. Oftentimes, multiple stakeholders will have conflicting feedback. So everybody needs to have a holistic view of what's actually being recommended by everyone else. And to be clear, here's a sample article in Google Docs. And we have turned on suggesting over here. So instead of editing, we're in suggesting mode. In Word, this is called track changes. You're probably familiar with it. And if we say, I don't like the word all here, I want to delete that, I would hit delete, and then that would come up with my name, my face, and my recommendation on what I'm going to do. Now, we can all see all the edits that are being made. And the single stakeholder, the single content owner, is the person who is going to then accept or reject the edits in here. And then we can get involved again from that point, we at Media Shower. So again, what we want to do is deliver the content in the Media Shower platform as we normally do, but now it's going to be published to a Google Doc. It's going to be published to a Google Doc. Everyone is going to review with the suggesting feature turned on. And the gray is what's being done internally at a client. The orange is what we are doing at Media Shower. So we've delivered the content. They have then coordinated, the single content owner has coordinated everyone's reviews. If everything is good to go, then it's approved to publish and it goes on to the final step of the assembly line. If it needs work, the client content owner can go back into the Media Shower platform and request revisions. There's a button that says request revisions, and that will send it back into the assembly line to the editor and back to the writer if needed to go make those final edits. And at that point, we redeliver the content and then publish it. So this is the process flow. And it's a little bit different for every client in that they may have multiple people who need to review internally. But again, we want to follow these principles, deliver it as a single Google Doc, use the suggest feature, and have a single content owner who runs the show, manages everyone, and then gives it back to us. This is the way that works. So that's how we manage multiple approvers. Now, all of this ties back to our Media Shower values. If you watched our training video on values, this encompasses all 5. The quality, think about all those great brands. And they're great not because they're perfect, but because they're continually striving for excellence. And that's what we want to be doing with our content. Honesty, asking the difficult questions. And we want to ask the difficult question as we look at this assembly line. Are we communicating? If we're not getting content through the system, we're not communicating. And if it's not good, then we're not communicating effectively. So again, we always want to be monitoring both quantity and quality of what's coming through the system. Discipline, we talked about this as self-mastery. And this is very much about designing good production systems and mastering these systems to make them efficient and effective. And confronting the hard problems. These are hard problems. They're organizational problems that we're talking about here. But in so doing, we are continually improving both our clients' businesses and our business at Media Shower, because what we're doing is making their communication better. We're making their processes better, but we have to produce it in order to improve it. So if we're not getting any content through that system, we can never actually measure the results to then improve them. And finally, agility. We talked about this in the sense of this virtuous circle where we're trying new things quickly and fearlessly. Again, be afraid of your fear. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. So that fear that stops the assembly line in its tracks, we've got to overcome that fear and just try new things, get the content published. And we're going to learn from that. We can measure those results, and then we can change our approach as that data comes in. That's what agility is all about. So that's how the assembly line sometimes gets held up, and that's how we can improve the assembly lines for our clients and for the world. Thanks for watching.